You've probably heard the term playing tall being thrown around on all sorts of forums online when you're playing any sort of strategy game, and yes, it defines a certain playstyle within said games. There are tons of different descriptions going around for it in many titles, however, it usually boils down to the same terms. You, either purposely or accidentally, are playing with a very limited amount of space and need to make the most of it. It means maximizing the value of your resources and leveraging what you have versus much larger empires. And Stellaris is no different. Whilst playing wide and expanding in all directions is fairly easily done, playing tall, however, requires a specific set of game decisions to make your empire successful. Now today we're going to be taking a look at a basic tall empire and what it can do to survive, but more importantly, to be successful. And then at the end of the video, we'll also give you a build which is arguably one of the more powerful tall empire types that you can currently get, so stick around for that. However, first, let's lay out the definitions of a tall empire within the game and build a faction around those principles. So a tall empire has three major challenges. First of all, it lacks space, and therefore space resources. Space resources are super important within Stellaris in order to scale your empire relatively quickly, and wide empires have a lot of resources to use in any way, shape, or form. They also have a lack of planets and lack the overall area to build things. You cannot have that many buildings. You don't have that many districts. You somehow are going to need to leverage getting more of them. And then finally, there is a lack of pop growth areas. Again, having a lack of planets means you don't have multiple places to grow pops, and also no overflow of pops on places who can then migrate to other planets. Therefore, these types of empires can be very slow to grow compared to, say, a wide empire. However, this does not mean that there is no advantages to playing tall. First of all, you have a low impact on empire size effects, at least initially until you really start to get rolling. What does this mean? Well, it means that your technology as well as your tradition costs are going to be relatively low, basically at the default number for quite some time, whereas a wide empire is going to balloon that number and having to upkeep constantly to keep those values at a reasonable level. For instance, let's say that you have a super wide empire that has a 200% bonus on size effect. It means that their technology will cost 200% more. They'll need to build more labs to offset this. A tall empire doesn't have really all these problems, which means that tech scaling for these types of empires can be a little bit easier than the wide ones. Also, because you have such little territory, it means that you have a lot of influence to spend on projects. Whether or not you're building habitats, doing spying, or spending influence on other projects, you just simply do not need to go ahead and take more territory, or claim more territory for that matter, which is something that wide empires would do quite often. So you have that additional resource available, and you can spend it on things that wide empires simply don't have the resources to spend on. So let's take a look at this empire that we're going to be building for this particular video. This is the tall assembly, and as you can see, there is already a couple of things here that may stand out. So, an empire that is dedicated to play tall, or at least has the ability to scale towards tall, usually has the following parameters, or at least are the parameters that I would suggest to you. First of all, the whole appearance, etc. doesn't really all that matter. Still though, in terms of traits, unruly being one of the things that you bring in is usually quite good, because empire size from pops doesn't really affect us all that much, which means that we get 2 points that we can spend on whatever we want. Intelligent and rapid breeders in this particular case is quite good. Having adaptive is also quite nice if you want to leverage the happiness that you can get from other planets and get more resources out, is quite nice. However, due to technologies within the game, this kind of becomes moot later on, and you could potentially bioengineer it in. Rapid breeders, in the meantime, getting more pops is always good. And intelligent, science. Get more science. That's always a very good approach. Now, when it comes to origins, there are two main origins that I would suggest in this particular case. One of which is Remnants. Now, Remnants starts you off with a relic world that you can turn into an Ecumenopolis for free without taking the Ascension perk that is required normally of it, which basically means that you have yourself a extra Ascension perk that you can spend on whatever you need. And as a tall empire, having very specific Ascension perks are going to be pretty important. However, starting off with the Relic World, in addition to that, will give you additional technologies at the start of the game. And as I mentioned, you can roll into getting Ecumenopole type districts relatively quickly, such as, for instance, mostly the Foundering District, which is quite important. Secondly, another option that is very, very nice for this type of empire is, of course, the Voidborn. Now, Voidborn is kind of interesting because, you know, they have a couple of really interesting approaches. First of all, they start off on habitats, and they prefer habitats. Because you have such a small footprint, it means that you will need to build habitats pretty much everywhere. And Void Dwellers do really well on habitats. However, they don't do all that well on planets, which means you will need a secondary species to come in. In addition to that, they also, they get a lot of bonuses from science and stuff from working on these places. Plus, putting in a habitat on a specialist resource will mean that you can get that resource on the actual habitat rather in space. And once again, the most important thing here is getting resources from workers versus resources from space, because that's what Tall is all about. Then in terms of governing and ethics, I kind of personally really like at the moment to go Spiritualist because of the monthly Unity modifier, as well as the Edicts upkeep bonuses. We really need Edicts for a Tall Empire in order to get as much value out of our resources. Getting a 20% bump into minerals is great. We could go even higher onto the Fanatic Spiritualist, but that's not, it's not all that great. In addition to that, in the mid-game, once we get the ability to get a third Civic, we will have access to Ascensionists. Now, Ascensions are a heavy planetary specialization bonus, where we can add additional bonuses to our planets by ascending them, all the way up from level 0 to 10, and this can have massive impact. Now, Planetary Ascensionists will give a 25% bonus to those effects, and that is not an insignificant amount, especially when you have only a few planets and you can crank them all the way up to level 10. Plus, the Planetary Ascension cost goes down, which means that you need less Unity to do so, and the tradition cost on Empire size goes down by 25, which once again is really, really good because it means you can get more traditions even quicker. Plus, Spiritualists have access to a very special type of federation, the Spiritualist Federation, ironically, and now those will give you access to an additional bonus, which can make the Planetary Ascension perks even better, which means that you can get even more resources out of your planets. The Federation for Spiritualists is actually really, really good, and having access to it, so nice. But you don't really need it until the early game, which is where Masterful Crafters and Mining Guilds come in. You can go for anything you want, even, say, Exalted Priesthood or anything like that. Functional Architecture is also quite good. But personally, these two are usually quite good to start off with. Catalytic Processing, bit of a mixed bag, especially if you don't get a lot of food worlds at the start of the game. Then, of course, Egalitarian, getting additional Unity from factions is very, very nice. Plus, Specialist Pop resource output, plus 5%, is not something that you should overlook. Getting those additional resources, especially the alloys, consumer goods, etc., from Pops is really, really nice. Plus, you can have the Utopian living standards for Pops. Not that you're going to be using it, because every single Pop is going to be working all the time, so you won't have a lot of unemployment, but still. Then finally, Xenophile, trade value modifier plus 10 is not really all that great, but the available Envoys plus 1 is really, really good. An empire of this type really needs their friends in order to be able to function. So do be aware of that is happening here. We should probably roll this back to Remnants for this particular example, shouldn't we? Yes. For flag, of course, we need to go with the orange goatsy flag. We're going to go dive in and see what a tall empire plays like within Stellaris. So welcome to the start of our game. It is a fairly standard cartwheeled galaxy that we have these days, and it looks like we have a reasonable spot. Now we are going to be playing this as a single sector empire, and we already have 2 planets nearby, which means that those are prime for colonization and are going to be our main goal. The thing here is that we will probably want to get a little bit of focus on technology. Going for these sort of technologies, especially the researcher bonuses or the global energy management, is quite good. What we however want to avoid are these space-based technologies. We want to use these technologies to roll into other techs. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes you just don't have the technology available that you want to research, and you want something cheap to roll the dice to get a new set of resources, or at least technologies. And considering most of our resources are going to come from people on the planets rather than resources in space, using the quantum theory, as in boosting researchers, has far higher priority than getting resources from space. So we're going to be doing that, and we're actually going to do that for all options here. So that's actually really good. We got all 3 of them right off the get-go. And on top of that, we're just going to go ahead and get a science ship up and running and survey these systems, because we will want to get ourselves some visibility on what is going on with these empires and what our position is within the galaxy. And then, well, then we can establish our first sector and see how it goes from there. Now we've gotten to the point where our first tradition has become available, and it's always really important to pick the right decision at the start of the game. Considering we are playing tall in this particular case, we have a lot of options, but no other option is better to us right now than Discovery, for a variety of reasons. First of all, Discovery gives us access to map the stars, which is the adoption effect. It unlocks an edict, which will give us a higher anomaly research speed, or at least a chance of finding them, which is incredibly good. Plus, Science Division will give us additional research alternatives, which means that we can cycle our technology faster and basically get more, basically focus our science approach a little bit more. However, once we've gotten Science Division, we're actually going to bypass into Prosperity, because we want to get standard construction templates as fast as possible to reduce the cost and increase the build speed of buildings and districts. But we're not there just yet. We're going to go for Discovery first, and then immediately go into the edict screen and enable Map the Stars. This will go into our edict fund and will help out quite a lot, because as you can see, if we go in there, basically what it says, survey speed will increase by 25%, plus we get additional chances of discovering anomalies. And anomalies are so important as a tall empire, because we want to get all those juicy materials in space when we can. We don't want to focus on them just yet, but the more resources we can get in space, the better. We're just not going to be able to leverage them all that well in the early game. 3 years in, what do we do? Well, we have our first colonies on their way. We found these 2 worlds nearby, these guaranteed planets, and on top of that we found a potential alpine world as well. And we're currently in the process of colonizing, and we, on top of that, have gotten the first traditions up and running. We got standard construction templates up and running, as well as Science Division. Now we're going to go ahead and fill in the Discovery tree completely to get our first Ascension perk. However, our science ship will start to discover places all over the shop, places that we can go into in terms of anomalies. But the question is, do we really want to go into every single one of these anomalies? Do we want to research them, or just skip them for now? I would highly recommend skipping them for now. Find as many anomalies as you can within 5 jumps of your capital, because that's the maximum size of a sector. Then go in and get every single anomaly within that range whilst your construction ships are starting to colonize everything. In addition to that, what you can do is you can also set up the automated construction on your construction ship, and they will start to fill in all the gaps where needed. Plus, you should probably already have, at this point, the first stage of having additional jobs available. Just start filling that up with research labs if you can. It's usually quite useful to have more research labs so you can get through the science, because that's kind of obvious. But still, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we can do here. But do you really want to spend the resources on this planet already? No. Why? Because we are looking for something specific. We are looking, in this particular case, because we have the remnants set up, we're looking for a blocker removal governor, which would help us quite a lot. But it's something that we don't. Oh, good lord, that is a ruined Dyson sphere. Well, this will probably not happen in your standard run, getting a ruined Dyson sphere 2 jumps away from your capital. Let's talk a little bit about first contact situations. Because we are playing as a tile empire means that we need to get as many friends as possible. It is so important that we play this incredibly safe because we do not have the resources to pump into a giant fleet. We want to pile up those alloys as high as we can until we can get habitats and then spam them all over the place. But that does mean that we need to make friends as much as possible. And thankfully, due to the fact that we went a little bit into the xenophile direction, it means that the opinion to other species is higher to us. Plus, we get an additional envoy, which really helps in situations like this, where there are 3 first contact situations going. Also, it already starts to look like I'm already a little bit boxed in over here, and I will need to take this territory as fast as I can, because I do not know what these Xenos are up to. And especially, I want to make sure that I have access to this ruined Dyson sphere as much as possible, or at least as fast as possible, and then try to figure out what is going on with these aliens. This could potentially be a place where we may or may not want to put a... what's the word I'm looking for here? A bastion system, fortresses. However, there is a potential system next door, which has a neutron star in it, which gives us a sublight modifier of 50%. With all the planets that are in here, as well as the placement of those planets, we could be looking at a very interesting fortress system here as well, because any ships that are coming in here could be nice. This could be a good choke node, so we want to keep an eye on this and try to claim it. We have made first contact, and this is probably one of the most important stages within the game. We want to get as many good relationships with the people around us as possible. And as you can see, we're already kind of pushed into a little corner here, which in general is fine because, well, as I said, we want to make as many friends as we can, but we also don't want to invest in our military if we can avoid it, which is also why we're not going for any military technologies in this particular case. We want to make sure that we have as many basically embassies going on. We want to get many of those in here. Right now we won't be able to do that yet with this Martial Empire over here. They'll most likely try to take us over, so having a station on standby here with a bunch of hangar bays is probably a good idea. But for instance, this Megacorp over here, having a migration treaty or an embassy with them is probably going to be a good idea. Because not only having a good relationships with these guys will also mean that they will start building holdings on our worlds, which we can get jobs out of, which is kind of nice. Still, though, at the moment, we still want to expand a little bit more before we start to fully specialize everything. We've already gotten ourselves a few worlds. This one is very clearly a mining world, and we will specialize it as such by getting the mining world designation. And this is very much a food world. This means that we still need an energy world. It looks like that this one is going to be okay for that, but there's also still a candidate over here, which once again does look like a strong mining world, but we'll have to see. In the end, it doesn't really matter all that much as long as we've got places where there is energy in space. Because as long as there's energy in space and we can build habitats on it, then, well, we can essentially get infinite energy. But we'll get to that shortly. In the meantime, keep making friends. Now, the game has been moving along for a little while, and we've made some friends, but more importantly, we have unlocked the ability to become a federation, which is exactly what we are going to do. As a tall spiritualist empire, it gives us a lot of flexibility to become a federation, specifically if we want to become a covenant, because these people over here are also spiritual seekers, and they are overwhelming to us, but they also want to form a federation, or at least we can bribe them into becoming a federation, which is exactly what we're going to do. So we're just going to call this federation something interesting, and then just take it from there and create this here organization. Well, why is this so important? Well, let's go and take a look at some of the abilities of the things that we can do here as this type of federation. Also, it looks like we just made first contact with a whole bunch of additional empires, which also helps us because it's more friends to make. Now, the most important part here is level 3 of the Holy Covenant. And that is specifically the Pursuit of Ascension, as well as the Heavenly Accord. Now, the Heavenly Accord at level 3 will give us a 20% bonus to Planetary Ascension effects, which in combination with the other Ascension effects that we are going to reform our stuff into, we don't have the pick available yet, but we will do soon, will boost our planets into the stratosphere. And that is even before we add things like orbital rings to them or hyper specialization buildings. So yeah, already we're looking really good. We've got friends, we've got protection. We don't need to build any fleets for our own defense, and we can just focus completely on our economy and not waste a single shred of those alloys. It's been a couple years of in-game time now, and as you can see, our empire has grown ever so slightly. We're trying to play still as tall as we can, obviously not as tall as these guys, but still we've managed to get a bunch of resources that are going to be pretty important to us. Especially this dark matter, as well as this stack of various strategic goods, because strategic goods are actually incredibly useful for a tall empire. So where do we go from here? We're 57 years into the game. We've gotten ourselves a bunch of traditions unlocked, which is going quite smoothly, and we have 3 planets right now. 3 planets is not a lot, but thankfully, due to our positioning, we are terraforming 3 more. But what are we going to do at this point in time? What do we actually need? Well, we are going to need science and other resources. In terms of other resources, we're looking quite flush. We got a lot of energy, a lot of minerals, a lot of food. Everything's going quite well. But science is something that we always need more of, which is why we're going to do the following. We are going to start to mass produce habitats, because we've just unlocked them, and we are going to start placing these habitats in places where we can get science out of them. We are very much after the special science district. It's not necessarily the best way of getting science within the game, but the real problem that we have is we just simply do not have enough building slots for our population to use, or at least have space to put them, because we're using a lot of science here already, but we definitely want more. In this particular case, we probably want to use something along the line of a mineral purification plant. But we're building 2 habitats, and from this moment onward, it's just habitats all the time. Our economy is looking pretty strong. We can buy alloys just as we go. Our biggest bottleneck here is influence, which is why we're going to keep picking up on that. As well, in addition, we've gotten to level 3 in our federation, which means that we can now get planetary ascension effects. Now, what does this mean? Well, let's take a quick look here at our capital. As the planetary ascension effects will kick in right now on our planetary designation, we can have a resource modifier of from jobs plus 10%. However, if we would upgrade this to the first tier of ascension, this would go up by 36%, which is a pretty significant chunk. And once we have the actual unity to deal with this, I can properly show you this, the impact that it has, that is. So, Ascension effects. We now have enough unity to upgrade our place here, our capital, to a higher version of itself. Right now, we are getting 10% additional resources from jobs. That by itself may not seem like a lot, but once we actually start to add things on, then it can get pretty crazy. So let's ascend our capital, and all of a sudden, we now have a 13% resources from jobs. Again, that may not seem like a lot, but we will get more knock-on effects. Stability has gone up by 1.8%. The amenities amount has gone up. Automatic resettlement chance has gone up. Basically, overall, this planet has simply gotten better. More resources are streaming out of this place, which means that we can build more over time. And on top of that, it looks like we've got enough influence to build more stuff as well. Jumping ahead a little bit here, as obviously you can see, we've colonized a couple more planets after terraforming them, and now it's time for us to start ballooning on a relatively small footprint, because we are now building tons of different types of habitats. We got science habitats, we got mineral habitats, we got energy habitats, and every single one of these is a place that generates pops, but also generates resources to spend on other things. The planets themselves are incredibly useful as well, because we are about to get orbital rings. Now, orbital rings are incredibly useful to further specialize our planets. For instance, our Empire capital right now has the ability to generate a lot of civilian goods, but also alloys, etc. And we are currently in the process of maxing out this entire place so that we can turn it into an ecumenopolis, fed by all these mineral worlds that are all over the place. Now, this, for instance, perfect mineral world right here. It's got so many of them. So we're just going to go ahead and select minerals here, and then immediately also put on a mineral purification plant, because we need these places to crank out all these resources for our capital. Now, it's something else that you may have noticed as well, that we have a bunch of toxic terraforming candidates nearby as well that may be interesting in the long run, but not for now, because we are far, far away of that. Anyway, talking a little bit about the joys of the habitats, we will also want to start speccing into Voidborn. Voidborn is actually really important for us, and because it will allow us to get better habitability inside of our habitats, plus we get those additional building slots that we desperately need, because we need more building slots to get strategic resources, to get more science, etc. Next up, we will most likely go into the engineered evolution tree, because it is incredibly good and will give us a lot of flexibility. And 35 months from now, we will already be there. And being able to genetically engineer our pops to perfection means that we can do whatever we want with them. All of our construction ships are now busy building all sorts of things. We got orbital rings being constructed pretty much everywhere under every single planet that is available, or habitats are coming up, or they're currently loitering for some reason, and they really shouldn't be doing that. We're spending all of our influence, our new habitats that are popping up all over the place. Hopefully mostly in systems that already have planets in them, so that we can use the local stations to apply effects to them. However, something really important in the game has just happened. We have just discovered probably the most important thing that an empire can get if they're playing tall. And that's over here in this particular system called Impultov. In Impultov is a very specific space creature called the Central Processing Hub. Now, Central Processing Hub is a ancient drone platform, and basically this is what generates drones that spread out through all the galaxy. Now, this particular hub will drop the most important relic that a tall empire can get, and that is the Surveyor. The Surveyor will basically generate a new set of resources within your territory every 5 years, and that is one of the most ridiculous things that can happen, because 9 science, 9 minerals, 9 energy, all that stuff starts to pop up, and now all of a sudden that science of that increases the resources in space becomes a lot more interesting, because not only can we use that to roll over our research goals into something more interesting, it now starts to affect us directly, because now we can leverage space for ourselves, even though we're not playing wide. The Surveyor should be your #1 goal to get in the mid-game. Thankfully, we've already set up a fleet that is ready to rock and roll. We're actually going to go ahead and set some gale speed on top of this. We managed to have a reasonable alloy income of 85. It's not great, but it'll do for now. We should actually start turning this planet into an ecumenopolis as soon as we can. We need a couple more minerals and influence to do so. So save up for that influence and get those minerals up and running. But once you see the Surveyor, beeline for it. You need the Surveyor as soon as you can. Kill it and take the relic. Alright, here we go. And engaging these guys. Ancient mining drones shouldn't be too difficult to overcome in general, as long as you stay safe and at the edge of the system. They're a little bit of a push over here. Don't be too concerned about them in general. And here we go. Just trying to engage these guys. Ooh, not try to aggro the other ones too much. Oh boy, let's hope it didn't just chew off a little bit more than I can take. Should be fine though. Ancient protection assets. Well, again, we're after the Surveyor. That's the most important part here. If we can get the Surveyor, then we are good. This is maybe a little bit concerning, but as long as we can clean them up, that's what's important.
Species improved. Technology discovered.
Yeah, we should have this. Surveyor is going to be ours. It's going to be the most important thing that we pick up in the entire game. No sweat, and
Survey.
there you have it. The strange device, the Surveyor. We will immediately activate it because we will instantly get +7 minerals to one of our planets. We're also going to do reversing of arcane technology because sometimes we can get some very, very rare stuff out of that, including the joys of the Fallen Empire buildings. But yeah, +7 minerals every 5 years. A special resource is definitely not an insignificant amount. In the meantime, we still are needing to get more of these here habitats up and running, and we're starting to run out of systems that have special materials on them. We still need a little bit more influence here and there, but in general we're doing extremely well. So where do we get from here? We basically have everything that we want. We've got orbital rings everywhere. Sure, we don't have habitation modules on a lot of them, but still it's helpful. We also need to upgrade some of this stuff because we want to make sure that we can, because we're after these buildings. Every single building needs to apply to whatever resource we are generating here the most. So this would be an orbital ring that boosts alloy production. This would be one that produces stuff for minerals, etc. And this just goes on and on and on. And basically, at this point in time, you can start steamrolling. Some of the empires next door, such as these Inquirers, have already realized that we are so powerful at the moment already that they have decided to join us. Yes, they are our vassal. They just straight up just joined. That's great. Our Federation's doing awesome as well. We want to keep on boosting our Ascension perks. There we go. What are we at right now? +14.25. Let's give it another boost to now at 18%. Again, it may not feel like a lot, but every single tick helps, and we can increase that across the board. This place as well. Here, more mining, more minerals being churned out. Let's get some more minerals. And again, it's all about maximizing the amount of resources that you have in a very small area. Beyond this, you don't really need to increase the size of your Federation. Only one other empire is enough to uphold it, as long as you keep this Heavenly Accord up and running for those Ascension effects. Start getting vassals, start getting more friends, start doing some conquest if you can. Also, remember the Goatsy flag. That's, I think it's also very important. However, at this point, the galaxy is your oyster. Start getting more science, start getting mega structures, getting this Dyson sphere online, I think would be a very good next step to aim for. We do need mega engineering for that though, so we need a little bit more science. Get at least 100 science per decade if you can. That's usually quite a good goal to have. But yeah, keep on going. Keep on building more and more habitats, preferably locally in places where you already have a station up and running so that you can apply the effects of the transit hub, apply the effects of the deep space black site as much as possible. Just keep on steamrolling, and all of a sudden you will have the entire list full of habitats and completely outcranking the galaxy on an incredibly small footprint. And they'll put out pops as well. So for instance, if you all of a sudden think, you know what, I want to build a ring world, yeah, those habitats, once they are set up properly, they will fill up that ring world with no problem whatsoever. And this Ecumenopolis that we're currently building, which is effectively the final step of this particular setup, will be a good initiator of that. But the real question is, what does a hyper-powered tall empire look like? Let's go and take a look at the ultimate high-powered tall empire in a special little setup that I've already done. And we can take a look at what a spiritualist megacorp can do whilst playing tall. Welcome to the ultimate tall build. As you can see in our space, we are a little bit compact. It's not too great, but we have a little bit of space. We have a few planets. But what is so special about this build, aside from the fact that I'm getting a lot of resources? This is a megacorporation, a very special megacorporation. Again, egalitarian, militarist, spiritualist megacorporation because of those Ascension perks. And Ascensionists, again, is a big thing. Minecraft Incorporated, as well as getting additional envoys, is a really big deal here. But this particular setup has spiraled completely out of control, with so many habitats that by itself is just super, super good. But you could think by yourself, you are 200 years years into the game, where are the rest of your habitats? There's only a couple of science ones here. Well, the Megacorp tall build has a big advantage over the standard tall build, and that has to do with the fact that it can generate holdings. In this particular version, 53 branch offices have been built across the galaxy, and every single one of these is producing science, diplomatic power, as well as amenities locally within my empire. And on top of that, Xeno Outreach Agency allows for additional immigration pull on every single one of my planets. Plus, the joy of putting private research enterprises pretty much everywhere means that we now have 8,000 science coming out of all of these branch offices that are all generating an insane amount of resources. Corporate embassies, executive retreats, and Xeno outreach agencies are insane. And you can always bundle that with a standard building of whatever resource you need. But it basically translates that we have an incredibly compact empire of maybe 19 structures, most of which are habitats, a bunch of which are also the Cadia type defense habitat, purely designed to get us more naval capacity because, well, we do have a reasonable amount of fortresses on all of these. But in general, this is incredibly powerful. In addition to that, because we are so strong, we can basically ask anybody to join us as a vassal, or specifically a subsidiary. And if they don't want to join, well, our naval power allows us to force them. And that basically translates to basically the entire galaxy being our bitch. Yeah, that's right. This is a tall empire that has essentially Diplo-conquered the entire galaxy and is currently on par to becoming the only empire within the council, and immediately following that one up, becoming the Galactic Emperor, without ever firing a shot, except for an uprising here and there in one of our vassal empires. And that is all done through the power of the branch offices. They are generating so much energy. In general, I think we're producing 14,000 energy right now, and all of that is going to a variety of things, but still, it's just insane. We're getting so much energy here. But what is that energy even used for? Well, strategic resources. We're buying a ton of them because, once again, we have a very small footprint in terms of our building capacity, which means that we cannot really generate a lot of strategic resources. So we're going to need to buy all of that. But because we're a megacorp, we've got so much money, it doesn't matter what we do. Could I build more habitats? Absolutely. I could spam out 1 million habitats right now because we're also getting +9 influence. Apparently, we're getting quite a lot of that from our subjects as well as power projection. Plus, of course, having the Surveyor is amazing. In this case, I also have the Voltaum Reality Perforator in case I want to go to do some warring. But overall, we are by far the strongest empire in the galaxy, whilst only playing slightly on the tall side. If you have more questions about how to play tall, how to basically work around some of the issues within the game, where should you go, how should you block things, feel free to leave your comments down below, your questions down below, and I'd be happy to answer to you. Again, this is a situation that you may find yourself in. You don't necessarily have to focus on building tall, but sometimes you're just blocked in, and instead of throwing in the towel and starting a new save file, try out playing tall, because playing wide is fun and all, but there is something special about building a hyper efficient empire that can just crank out 1 million resources without any issues whatsoever. My lord, this place is just churning out resources, and we can probably just screw it. Let's add some more districts on this, because I want at least 1,000 alloys by the end of the next 5 years. Dang. If you like this video, let me know. Leave a comment down below, and always leave a like. That always helps. But yeah, the tall build. Very strong. Extremely strong if leveraged well. Very walk quietly with a very big stick. It's very diplomatic focused and also very intense on the economy side. And once you start get rolling, you are basically unstoppable. So remember, get that Surveyor. It's kind of important. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons. And until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, each other.